Good afternoon, everyone. We want to welcome you to our Cox Campus year-long journey. This is our first session for the 2023-2024 school year. And our sessions this year are all about cultivating language-centered classroom. And today's session, we're going to be focusing on setting up a positive classroom culture with language. So we are very, very happy to have you all with us today. Next slide, please. All right, so we always like to find out who is in the room with us today. We are very collaborative here. We like to hear from you all in the chat or coming off of mute. So we want to take some time for you all to let us know in the chat whether or not you are a Cox Campus member. If you are familiar with Cox Campus, and if you are a member, please let us know. Also, let us know what best describes your role. Are you a teacher? What grade do you teach possibly? And we also like to know where are you joining us from? We are here in the state of Georgia. So if you are in the state of Georgia, please let us know what part of Georgia you're from. Maybe you're in another state, maybe in another, let us know around the country where you're from, or maybe even outside of the United States. We definitely have people who join us from other countries. So please let us know where you are joining us from, whether in the state, the country, or around the world in the chat. We'll give you a few minutes to just let us know. Oh, I see we have Erica who's joining us from Texas. Hi, Erica. Welcome. I see Monica who's in Los Angeles. Hi, Monica. Welcome. Oh, we have Ernestine from Virginia. Wow. Hi, Ernestine. Brianna from California. California's in the house. Memphis, Tennessee, Alabama. Oh, my goodness. We have so many people from across this country, which is really, really exciting. Awesome, awesome. All right, let's keep going. So one of the things that we find very important here at Cox Campus are our core values. And our core values, they really are kind of what grounds us, right? And so we always want to make sure whenever you all are joining us for any type of Cox Campus training, we always want to make sure that your experience with us is rewarding, that it is empowering, that it is connecting, safe, and essential. And it is always our hope that you will experience these core values today and anytime that you're working with us, because we want this to be a valuable experience for you anytime you join us in the work that we're doing. Now, anybody who is, if you're not a Cox Campus member, which we hope that you all are, but if you're not, we do want to take a moment to share a link with you in the chat about joining Cox Campus. Now, joining Cox Campus, it's number one, it's free and it's quick and easy, right? But most importantly, it is free. And once you join Cox Campus, you're going to have access to free courses and resources. And a lot of the things that we're going to be sharing today come from the courses that are on Cox Campus, and the resources as well come from Cox Campus. So it's really important that you all have access to this. Once again, it's free because we want you to be able to access everything that we're talking about once you join Cox Campus. And I believe that that website is in the chat for you to join if you are not a member yet already. All right, so now we're going to introduce you to your co-facilitators today. So I'll start with myself and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues. My name is Anisha Donald, and I am one of the K-3 content developers at the Rollins Center and Cox Campus. And I'm going to let my colleague Makini introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Makini Coleman. I'm also a content creator and instructional designer for some of the courses that are on Cox Campus. And I'm going to pass it to my lovely co-facilitator, Sally.
Hey everybody, I'm Sally Edwards. I have the same role as Anisha and McKinney, and the course that we're talking about today is near and dear to my heart. It is the oral language course, and it is one that I wrote. And so we hope that you find this information valuable, and we'll be linking to some of the resources from that course throughout the presentation.
Thank you, ladies. And we also want you to know about our moderators. These are going to be the people that are kind of behind the scenes. So we have Alistair Smick, who is also a K-3 content creator and instructional designer, and Trina Heath, who is one of our technical project managers here at the Rollins Center and Cox campus. So they will be answering any questions, running technology behind the scenes. So just know that they are there helping us along the way. All right, so let's get into our session goals. So today, we're going to be focusing, as I said earlier, on creating a language-rich classroom environment. And so some of the topics that you're going to hear about from my co-facilitators are about strategies to scaffold children to use that academic language in the classroom. We're going to be showing you resources and sharing resources that Sally mentioned to implement these strategies that we're going to be talking about. So two of our biggest goals are going to be learning about what is a language-focused classroom environment and understanding how to use a resource called the Talk Ladder to create a classroom environment that is language-focused. And again, as Sally mentioned earlier, all of this information that we're going to be talking about today is going to be coming from one of our courses, the oral language course that is on Cox campus. So please be sure, if you have not signed up or you haven't taken that course, please be sure to sign up and take that course, because all of these resources that you're going to be shown today can be accessed in that course, as well as just a plethora of information as well. So now I'm going to hand it over to McKinney to talk about language-rich classrooms.
All right, so I'm going to just start us off, and I'm going to read this quote. And as you're listening, I want you to think about any words or phrases that resonate with you, because I want you to later put them in the chat. So listen to this as I read it. We want a classroom culture that is conducive to having rich conversations. We need to create a safe space where children feel empowered to take risks, use new words, share thoughts and ideas with the class, and challenge the ideas or beliefs of their classmates. So I would like you to go ahead and in the chat, what resonated with you? What words or phrases did you see or hear that really stuck out to you about a language-rich classroom? Okay, I see empowered, empowering children to take risk, new words, a safe space, rich conversations, culture. I see some of the same themes coming up. Great. Okay, so challenging ideas. Nice. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share some characteristics of a language-rich classroom. If we can go to the next, yes. So a language-rich classroom is one that promotes equity of voice. So when we think about equity of voice, this is having children have multiple opportunities to use their voice in a safe space and encouraging them to share their thoughts and feelings, to ideate out loud, to use self-talk when working through an assignment, and to engage in discourse with their peers. The next characteristic is culturally and linguistically preserving. So this is when we celebrate all children's voices so that they see themselves and that they feel included. The next one that we have is lift language, and we're going to really focus on this one a lot in this discussion. This session is being intentional, and that's the key word: being intentional about scaffolding a student's language as they grow their oral language. And then the last one is builds metalinguistics awareness of components of oral language. And what that means is to be consciously thinking, have kids consciously thinking about the language that they're using and how it is used. So I talked about lifting language. So let's go to the next slide. And we're really going to focus on lifting language. And one way we're going to talk about that is through vocabulary. So when we talk about lifting language, what that means is we're referring to modeling grammar usage and the use of sentence structure and complex sentences. And in addition, we are talking about the intentional modeling of using sophisticated vocabulary. So some of you probably have already, like if you give me just a little thumbs up, you can give me a physical thumbs up or a thumbs up if you ever heard of the 3 tiers of vocabulary. Okay, so research shows us that vocabulary knowledge plays a critical role in future reading achievement. Research also shows us that when teachers use complex, well-formed sentences with rich vocabulary, that this actually translates into students' language skills and helps to improve them. So let's talk about the 3 tiers now. And it's Isabel Beck that helped to create this structure. And it's about selecting targeted words. Well, no, we can use it to select targeted words. So just the 3 tiers of vocabulary first. If we talk about the tiers, the bottom tier is tier 1 words. So if you can see here, those are words that are commonly used. And children most likely, not all the time, but most likely come to school knowing these words, right? So they're words like, here we have examples: walk, table, right? Then when we go up to tier 2, these are words that are more sophisticated, and they can be used in a lot of different contexts and situations. And a lot of times kids will see these words in multiple texts, right? Or different content areas. And that is the reason why we push these tier 2 words too, because they'll see them multiple times. And this should be the daily goal, right? If we're using words to teach for explicit instruction. So some examples of this include words like annoyed, contain, original. And as we go up to tier 3 words, these are words that have specific meanings and are only used when talking about certain subjects or occupation. They're very specific. So for example, a word like photosynthesis, or we have examples here, pollution. You usually don't hear those words often unless it's in like you're talking about like maybe science or social studies. Is very specific. Okay. So one thing I do want us to realize, though, is that sometimes kids this is a general guide, right? In a way to categorize these words. But sometimes some kids may struggle with tier 1 words. So we don't want to just ignore that. And they may need some explicit instruction in those words as well. Okay, but this is our general guide to categorizing words. And this helps us to choose words for instruction. So if we look at the next slide, we're going to look at some examples of words in these tiers. So for example, in tier 1, you might have a word like grow, bed, voice, happy. In tier 2, we have some words like fierce, distinct, maintain, and expose. Tier 3, we have barter, chromosome, nomadic, and photosynthesis. So right now, we're just going to do a very quick activity. I'm going to say a word, and I want you to put, if you think it's tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, you just put it in the chat. So the first word I'm going to give you is cat. What tier do you think that is? 1. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to give you another word. What about patella? Patella. Is that tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3? Tier 3. All right. Anybody know what patella is?
It's your kneecap.
It's your kneecap. There you go. All right. And I'm just going to give you one more word. Thank you. One more word is jubilant. Is that tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3? Jubilant. 2. Yep. All right. So let's move to the next slide. And let's talk about recasting. This is actually very well, let's first talk about it. Okay, so if you think about recasting is a strategy that we can use to support students in our classroom. And this method, what you do is you repeat what the student is saying and you add to it for the purpose of, there's that word intentional again, for intentionally lifting language. And this could be as simple as adding on a word, or it could be as not complex, I'm not going to say complex, but actually bumping up and adding in those tier 2 words and giving even more detail. So if you let's look at these examples one by one. So let's say a child says up. You might say in response, up, please. And of course, this might be for very young children. What if a child says, I'm sad? You might say to them, you're disappointed. So you took that word sad and then you added a tier 2 word so that they can hear that word, right back at them, right? If a child says they are the same, you might say, and this might be a math class, right? They might say these two sums are the same. They are equal. So you put it in that math vocabulary. A child might say money is easier to trade. You might respond by saying money is easier to trade than bartering. So you put it in that word, right? A child might say, it makes me feel upset. And then you might say, the author's words invoke emotion and help us feel empathy for the character. One thing I want you to notice is these things were used, of course, what we can imagine the child saying these things is across different content areas and across different times of the day, right? So we saw an example that might be math, one that might be social studies, one that just might be them in class saying that something made them feel upset, right? So we can use recasting throughout the entire day. And I think what I was trying to say before, I was trying to say earlier, is that this is a very powerful strategy. This is something that was new to me not that long ago. And I think it's something very easy that we can incorporate into our daily instruction. So we're going to go ahead and practice right now some examples of how you could recast. And I'm just going to give you just 2 different scenarios. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Okay. So let's imagine with this first example, let's imagine you are reading a read aloud and it is about Little Red Riding Hood, right? And we get to the part where the wolf, has sadly eaten grandma, okay? And you might ask the students, okay, well, how did Little Red Riding Hood feel? And you might have a student that says, she feels sad, okay? How might you recast? And you can come off of mute if you want, or you can answer in the chat. You might say instead, she feels what? Let me see in the chat. She feels frightened. She feels upset. Okay. Now let's go to the next. She feels discouraged. She feels disappointed. She feels scared, upset. Okay. So let's use another example outside of a read aloud. Let's say you're out at recess, right? And you ask a child, okay, well, what's the weather like? And they say, it's cold outside. Now, if we use the extending, because remember I told you extending is more than just adding one word. What might be an example that you can go ahead and recast or expand to add to that, add some rich vocabulary to your response so that they hear those words or hear a more complex sentence? Freezing. It's chilly enough to wear a jacket. The weather has low temperatures today. I love it. The weather has low temperatures. These are some great examples. The temperature is freezing. Excellent. Great. So this is Wade. How did you feel doing that? Can anybody come off of mute and tell me, was it hard to do that? Or was it difficult? Like, how did it feel to do that? Do you feel like this is something that you can do? Natural, easy. I had to think about it. Okay, honest. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to our next facilitator.
Mm-hmm. All right, if we can go to the next slide. What McKinney said used the word intentional twice in her conversation about lifting language. And for those of you who said that felt natural, that felt good, it kind of felt natural for me too, but I wasn't doing it all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like I wasn't being intentional about it. And when we can be intentional about recasting and using other strategies to lift language, it is super powerful in the classroom. We're going to watch a quick video. This is from the oral language course. I wish my picture wasn't up here on the screen. But we're going to watch, and I want you to pay attention. This is the 3rd grade class. I want you to pay attention to the types of words we hear the children using and how the teacher responds to the children. And I will just note that this is a really good example of what McKinney was talking about earlier maybe whoever, or it may have been Anisha, talking about equity of voice. It's a very back and forth exchange between the teacher and the children. We're going to use this video as an example in our next activity. So pay attention and take note of the words and then how the teacher is responding to the children.
I have a question for you guys. Do any of you know what this is?
I do.
What, Kendall?
It's like a hot air balloon.
Hot air balloons.
And it's next to a school.
Next to a school. Do y'all know what school that is?
I think so. It's our primary school.
That's our school. Okay, so look at this picture. Do you see these hot air balloons? They are deflated. They're deflated. That's right. What? And then once they put that air in there with the machine, it's inflated. It's inflated. So I wonder, is the hot air balloon would we say the hot air balloon is rigid or flexible?
It's rigid. Because when you blow it up, it's kind of hard. No, it's flexible. Because you know how sometimes air can bend because it's invisible and it doesn't.
Invisible.
Can y'all tell those children are from South Georgia? Some strong dialect in there. So we asked you to pay attention to the words and to pay attention to the teacher and how she was interacting with the children. So anybody want to come off mute or drop in the chat what they noticed about that video example? Did you hear some tier 2 vocabulary?
Yeah, she repeated the children's language and extended it.
She did. She repeated what they said, and she did the recasting technique that McKinney was talking about earlier. Absolutely. Did you notice how many tier 2 words the children were using? And
Yeah.
can you imagine like how that recasting, that constant recasting could impact the words that they may use in their expressive language? I'm seeing lots of great noticings in the chat. They felt comfortable. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, flexible, rigid, inflated, and deflated. This was obviously a science lesson. This was part of something they were doing with states of matter. All right, so McKinney introduced you to the recasting technique. This is our talk ladder, and this takes it a step further, that lifting language. Lifting language, we have multiple ways that we can do it. And in this instance, what we do is we scaffold the children. So you'll notice on the talk ladder, you have what the child says on the left, and then you have the safety nets on the right. And so our goal when children are answering our questions are for them to fully articulate a response using multiple complex sentences with tier 2 words. And I shared with a group earlier this week that I've seen kindergartners respond to questions this way. So make sure your expectations are really high. And the way we get them there is using these language scaffolds. So we'll go to the next slide, and we're going to give you just a minute to look over this, and there's a link in the chat, I believe. If it's not there, it will be in just a second. Go ahead and download that talk ladder, and we're going to give you about 4 minutes. This scenario that's on the slide, if you can, if you're joining from like a phone or something, this may be a little challenging for you, so you can just study this part on the screen. But what we want you to do is look at the talk ladder, and then pay attention to what you notice about the responses as you go up the ladder. Think about what you might feel most comfortable with, what might be a challenge for you to apply, and then what is something you've never tried before. So we're going to give you about 4 minutes to look at this and to just reflect. And the link to the talk ladder teacher guide is in the chat. All right, and we're back. What did you notice? Think about these questions that you see on the screen and tell us what you noticed. Is there a part you feel more comfortable doing, something you do naturally, like some of us said about recasting? Is there something you see that might be challenging for you? Feel free to come off mute. All right, Savannah says you go from restating, modeling and using the vocabulary to asking questions to get the children to use the vocabulary. Absolutely. Yeah, and it's so funny, we do some of these things naturally, but when we get intentional about these types of incidental teaching strategies, it can be super powerful. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any other reflections? I will say, as somebody who has coached teachers around this strategy before, it's tough. And don't expect to get it all right all at once. You might want to print this out and put it somewhere near maybe where you do read aloud, or maybe focus on just one rung of the ladder every week. Get that down and then move to the next one. But yeah, I think for some of us, this is something that we kind of do, but we probably don't do it intentionally. All right, so we're going to give you some more exposure to the talk ladder in the next slide. All right, let me tell you what you're going to do in your breakout room. You're going to get a link to a Google Doc or Google Slide presentation, and whatever number your breakout room is the slide you're going to go to on that presentation. And you'll work together in your groups to basically put a puzzle back together. You have safety nets for a scenario around the book Chrysanthemum, which we hope most of you are familiar with. And if you're not, it's about a little mouse who goes to school and she loves her name until all the children start picking on her about her name. And so there's a social emotional connection here. There's all sorts of great vocabulary in this book that you can use to really lift the language of the children in your classroom. So over to the side on your slideshow, you'll have the children's responses. They're out of order. You're going to put them back in order and match them up to the safety net that you would use in the classroom. So looks like we have the link to the Google Slides. So everybody open that up, and then we'll get put into breakout rooms in just a second. Okay, so we're back. And I hope you had a chance to go ahead and do that talk scenario. Let's look at the next slide. We can see the answers. We can see the correct answers and how we matched up that talk ladder. And as you can tell from the bottom to the top, the children have really, really short sentences without a lot of complex tier 2 words. And then as they go up the ladder, their language becomes more sophisticated and more academic, the way that we need them to be in school. I'm going to drop a link that we weren't planning to drop, but Sarah mentioned how she might like to do this with multilingual learners. And I'm going to drop our Obla poster. This is a poster that talks all about multilingual learners, and it pairs really nicely with the talk ladder. So that is that's now in the chat for you. All right. And I think we will go on to the next slide then.
All right. Thank you, Sally. So, one of the things that we always kind of think about when we're talking about just anything when it comes to trainings and classroom training, professional learning, professional development is time, right? And so we always talk about it's a lot of great information, but where do we have time to do this? How do we have time to do this? So we talked earlier about intentionality. We talked also earlier about how some people said that, yes, this, recasting and things of that nature do come natural to them, but there is a part that you have to be intentional about, right? With planning. And even though this might be something that comes naturally to you, or you can easily incorporate, you do have to be intentional about figuring out when to do that. So what we want to do now is, as we kind of start to wrap up and bring things to a close, we want to take some time to think about where can we incorporate the talk ladder into your day. So thinking about, your day from beginning to end when you're with students, we want you to take a moment to think about where you can incorporate this throughout your day. And we're going to give you a few minutes just to kind of think about it. And then if you could share in the chat, or of course, feel free to come off of mute and just share with us when you think about time, think about intentionality, think about, recasting, using the talk ladder. Where can this happen throughout your day? Felicia says anytime. Sarah's also saying anytime. Tina says that she teaches kindergarten. It's important to make them answer incomplete sentences instead of just using a couple of words. Absolutely. Savannah, listening comprehension, read aloud, close reading, small group, science, social studies, anytime. Very good. Felicia, we are talking with children all throughout the day. Absolutely. It can be used anytime within any content area. Absolutely. So that is definitely the big, big thing that we want you to take away from this. If you'll go to the next slide, please, is that really when we talk about using the talk ladder, it can be done all throughout the day. You can use it during read alouds. You can use it during number talks and math. You can use it when you're talking about science topics, social studies topics, during your morning meeting. Also, when you're talking about in special areas, music, art, dance, physical education, you really can utilize this resource and help to create this language rich environment anytime throughout the day. And so when we think about, just everything that teachers have to do, right? Everything that's on your plate, this is not something that we want you to think of like, oh, something else to do. This is how you can enrich and be intentional about what's already happening throughout the day and just kind of extending what you're already doing throughout the day, but making sure that that you are being intentional about planning it if it's not something that comes naturally to you, or if it's something where you have to think about to just extend it a little bit more. So we really just kind of want to hit that home that this can be done throughout the entire day. I want to take a moment just before we kind of really wrap up to see if there are any questions that anybody has. I feel like, we gave you a lot of great information, a lot of resources, and of course, there are plenty more where that came from on Cox campus. But are there any questions that anyone has that you want to put in the chat or you want to ask off of mute? All right, so I see a question about how can teachers use this with DLL? Sally, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So I would definitely, Elena, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I dropped the Obla poster in the chat. Good. So make sure you look at the Obla poster and check that out because it kind of gives specific examples. One of them is like honoring the first language. If a child responds in their first language, we want to honor that. And then we want to give it to them in English, but we don't want to discourage them from speaking in their first language because that's so critical. They need that strong foundation. We also want to really think about wait time with multilingual learners, making sure that we're giving them time to translate. I have a really good friend who grew up as a multilingual learner, and she said teachers never understood how long it took her to translate from, in her case, Greek to English. We also want to make sure we build on their responses, just like with that recasting technique. Always linking the first language to English. So if you do, like if you're going to have target vocabulary for the week, going ahead and like doing a quick Google Translate or talking to a colleague who speaks the first language. We also have tier 2 words in English and Spanish. We dropped that link in the chat a little bit earlier that are all on Cox campus. But I think the biggest thing when you're working with multilinguals is to add like visuals and gestures and props. And in our oral language course, we actually talk about this a lot because we know that the science of reading works for everybody, but for multilingual learners and dual language learners, they need a little bit extra. And so we kind of talk about that in like 5 of the 8 lessons in the course.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sally. And I do just want to also say, I saw someone ask about certificates. So absolutely, yes, you will receive a certificate of attendance. Link to the resources as well as the recording will also be sent out in a few days. So you will be able to get all of that information directly to your emails. All right. So as we move on, we just always like to revisit our session goals, right? To make sure that we have done what we said we were going to do as far as talking about what a language-focused classroom environment looks like and what that means, and also understanding how the resource of the talk ladder can be used to create a classroom environment that is language-focused. So in just a moment, you will have a poll that should pop up on your screen that will give us feedback to let us know how did we do. Did we, meet the session goals? Did you walk away with something that you can utilize in your classroom quickly? It just helps us to kind of, as we continue to plan. So please take a moment to complete that poll. It shouldn't take very long at all. We appreciate the feedback from you all. It helps us to be better. And again, as Alistair put in the chat, please be sure to join Cox Campus if you haven't already. Make sure to take the oral language course where all of this wonderful information came from today, as well as all of our other structured literacy courses that are there. We're so thankful that you all joined us today. And we hope to see you at our next session. Our next session will take place on November 30th. That session will be all about sound walls. And so we hope that you will be able to join us on that day as well, as we continue to talk with you more about cultivating language-centered classrooms.